damn. It's too late to be filming this. Unbelievable, dude. With the province of New Brunswick being at 3.9 months of inventory, which is right on the edge of going into a balanced market. And Moncton is well into being a balanced market and has been for quite a few months now. Where does that leave St. John? How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, my name is Brandon Vincent. I'm a real estate agent here in St. John, New Brunswick with eXp Realty. I've been actively selling real estate for over 7 years now. My goal on this channel is to bring you relevant real estate information in an entertaining way. If you like the sound of that, do me a favor, hit that like and subscribe button, leave a comment, let me know if you want to know anything. But without further ado, we're going to get into 2026 first real estate market update here in St. John. So before we can have a full understanding of what is transpiring here in St. John, I want to go over what's going on in the province as a whole, because we have three major cities that drive the majority of the province. We have St. John, Moncton, and Fredericton, with Moncton being in a balanced market, but Fredericton and St. John both still being on the selling side of the market. What does this mean? Where's the province going? What's happening? And how can we use this moving forward? So let's start off and look at New Brunswick. So for our New Brunswick data, we are still working with the October data because it does take the board a little bit longer to get all of the sales data from every single brokerage across New Brunswick. So what we're dealing with right now is October data for New Brunswick. But in saying that, the province is right on the edge right now of going into a balanced market. Remember from my past videos, if it's 4 months of inventory or below, then you are in a seller's market. If you're between 4 and 6 months of inventory, then that's balanced. And if you're 6 months plus, then you are in a buyer's market. So the point there is that we're right on the edge. The entire province sits right on the edge. Now, what does that mean for St. John? Is that the direction that we're going? Is that where St. John is headed? Well, let's take a look and see. I do have a downloadable PDF for the latest market information. So you can find it all right here, and it's in depth. There's charts and actually goes way more into detail if you're interested in looking at that. I update it every single month. So this is the December update that just came out. So the New Brunswick monthly summary for October 25 is New Brunswick's average house price is $339,917. And also we have the Fredericton area that sits above the provincial average at $372 for their average house price. And then you have the Greater Moncton area at $382 for the highest average price per major region in New Brunswick. We also have the Northern and Valley region actually at its lowest for all of the regions, $231,000. This is something worth noting. So the province for the month of October has seen its largest months of new listings, right? So the residential new listings, this is actually very promising because we've been having an inventory issue for the longest time. You know, the narrative here in New Brunswick has been that we've had a supply issue, and that's been what's been going on in St. John. That's what's drove the prices up so significantly, was the fact that there was a major crunch in supply and demand. House prices just started rising significantly, also because of our population growth across the province as well, which, if we haven't talked about that yet, the province of New Brunswick is currently sitting right around 870,000 people. So we're getting close to 900,000. With that being said, more homes need to be built, which actually brings me to my next point as we start to dive into St. John. This just in, Canada announces the construction of 152 rental housing units in St. John. So this is a quote from Wayne Long, and it says, today's announcement confirms more than 150 new rental housing units for the population of St. John. By using all of the tools at our disposal, we will overcome this crisis. Through the apartment construction loan program, our government is increasing the supply of rental housing by investing more than $46 million. The supply will benefit middle-class individuals and families and will have a positive impact on our economy, the Honorable Wayne Long said. He continues, "This is a huge win for St. John, and I am so pleased that all three levels of government are coming together to improve access to affordable housing for New Brunswickers." Absolutely. Particularly in this region where those kinds of places can be hard to come by. A total of 32 units in this development will be made available to seniors and to people with disabilities as affordable housing. That's actually really nice. This is an exciting day for St. John. The 99 King Street project represents more than much needed new housing units. It is about bringing people, energy, and vitality back into the heart of the city. Thank you, Wayne Long, for making those comments and bringing this information to us. In saying all that, let's actually take a look at the trends of St. John, kind of where things are going, what we can expect. I think that's actually very important to understand as well, what we can expect. And let's just see what's happening. So the only way to do that is for me to dive into the charts on my website. If you go to brandon.vincent.ca under market stats and trends, this is one of my favorite ones. This is the monthly sales activity and new listings. So as you can see, the new listings for December 2025, we had 87 new listings in the greater St. John area. Right? So not very much inventory coming out. But if you look at every other December in St. John, you'll also see that same pattern of the lowest number of new listings coming to market every single December. And then what happens is as you start to go into January, February, March, and as you're getting into the spring, you're seeing way more inventory coming on the market. And that's just the natural cycle of our market here. Now, if you look at the sales activity, this is where it gets a little bit interesting, because what I've noticed is the tops, so the peaks of each year of the sales activity kind of fluctuate a little bit. Something to keep in mind, though, is that all of this information is all from very strong sellers markets. If we start to go into a balanced market, I'm expecting to see these charts to start to separate, because right now the new listings and the sales activity are correlating fairly close to each other, especially from 2021 and 2022. 2023, you're starting to see a little bit of some separation. 2024, a little bit more separation. 2025, a little bit more separation. So it wouldn't surprise me if we do start to edge into, more of a balanced range just by looking at these charts, and especially where the Bank of Canada and a lot of the major banks have made predictions on where the Bank of Canada's rates are and gonna be. They all predict something similar, that the rates are probably going to remain very close to where they're at or go up 0.25. With that being said, that adds a little bit of predictability. Now, we all know that predictions are only worth the paper they're written on, right? Because anything can happen. All it takes is one tweet, is one worldly event to throw everything into chaos. So for the sales activity, 2021, you see June have 340 as the most amount of sales activity. So that was in June. And then as you come over to 2022, June again for the top of their sales activity. Then you come over here. This is where it gets a little interesting. In 2023, August was actually the top month for sales activity. But it was very much competing with June. In 2023, you had 221 sales in June, but then you had 226, 5 more sales in August. So August had the most amount of sales activity that year. But then you're coming over into 2024, and this is where it gets a little odd. October was actually where we've seen the most amount of sales. Interesting, right? Kind of coming into the fall a little bit, which was quite interesting, because June and July were still high with 209 for 2024, and then you've seen 209. Oh, 209, yeah, literally the same. That's kind of rare. And then October 229. Now, for this past year, 2025, July was the most amount of sales activity. So why is that important? Well, If you're going to sell a property, then knowing when there's the most activity can be extremely beneficial, right? Because do you want to list when there's a whole bunch of activity, when the market is hottest? There's pros and cons to every argument, right? Some people could say, I'd rather list when there's less listings so that there's more competition for mine. But the caveat there is that the buyers are less as well because there's not as many people out looking to do business during those times, which is why the sales activity is lower right around December, January, February. It's just natural. So it's like, do you want to list when there's less sales activity? Well, maybe not. You want to list when there's more sales activity. But there's also more listings too. So that's why it's important to kind of keep in mind as to what kind of market you're in too. So then if we're moving into a balanced market, then when you come on the market, then you can expect possibly to have a little bit of back and forth. But depending what happens in the spring, and I honestly think we're going to get into a seller's market into the spring. I just don't know if there's going to be that many buyers coming out. They're going to change it back to a balanced. I don't know, but I think it's going to be really interesting to wait and see exactly what does end up happening here. Another thing to keep in mind is the St. John average house price right now is $338,000. So that's quite a drop from our peak that we had in February. That was $400,000, and that was the highest average house price that St. John has ever seen. And now we're around the 338. I do expect to see this crawl back up. The average house price here has been something that on a long term has been rising, and there's no way to argue with that. If you look at this on a 10-year timeline, so that is something good to keep in mind. Coming down here, months of inventory in St. John, 3.5. So we are 0.5 months away from being in a balanced market. For the month of December in St. John, we have seen 117 active sales. The dollar volume sold is very low compared to most other months at 39,578,000. New listings, extremely low, 87 new listings. Active listings currently on the market, 410. Your sales to new listing ratio. So that's extremely high because there's more sales happening than there is listings coming on, right? That's why you have a higher percentile there. So that's a percentage, 134.5. The months of inventory, 3.5, telling us that we are still in the seller's market. December 2023, it was 409 months of inventory. Average house price, $338,276. And your median days on market's about 26 days on market. So things are still moving fairly quick. So here's my closing advice, okay? These next few months coming up, January, February, March, for buyers that are looking to get in the market with little competition, I think is going to be critical. If you're looking to get in the market and you've been struggling over the last few years to compete with the multiple offers and the pent-up demand that we've had, then I think these next few months are going to be critical for you to have a sharp eye out and looking at the market to try to find something that you do like right now. I know it may not be super enjoyable to go around and look at homes this time of year, but this time of year is probably going to be your best bet to get your foot in the door with the least amount of competition as possible, in my opinion. And for my sellers out there, if you currently don't need to sell right away, I would say plan on listing coming into the spring market, okay? And a lot of that is going to be weather dependent, because it's all going to be dependent on what happens with the snow, when that melts, when people start to actually feel excited about spring. Sometimes spring comes a little early, sometimes a little late. So all of that does factor into it. If you do not need to sell, I would say wait. Now, if you're in a position where you need to sell, then it's not the end of the world. There's still opportunities out here. It's just a matter of strategically placing your property, making sure that you're doing some critical marketing, because most people don't want to leave the house this time of year. So we need to blast that out there everywhere and to actually start to get the strategy dialed in and getting some of the marketing plans prepped, because some of these things can take some time, especially if there's stuff to do around the house, if there's little touch-ups here or there, little staging things that we can do to really showcase your property so that the first impression is just magnificent. So with all that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for sticking with me through this market update here. Hope this has brought some value. Hope this has brought something to think about. That's my goal at the end of the day, is just to give you guys something to think about. If you like this video, do me a favor. If you haven't yet, hit the like button, hit subscribe, follow along, because I really appreciate you staying to the very end. And I'll see you on the next video.